Ladies and gentlemen, the play's the thing, with your host, Judy Sleed. Special guest, James Larocca, Commissioner, New York State Public Service Commission. Now here is Judy.
It's me, Judy, that's me.
That's quite an introduction, I must
Isn't
say.
it?
The music and the voice, that's pretty
I
impressive.
love it, yes, we have to be professional here. And today I have a wonderful guest whom I tried to nail down for years, and finally I hooked him, Jim Larocca, the very handsome Jim Larocca. I always thought that you were an actor.
I'm a faker, not an actor.
Because we first met at Guildhall, which is a theater in East Hampton, and you were very active there, and I was always wondering what you're doing.
Well, my involvement in theater goes back quite a while, but I think the first thing I did at Guildhall was in 2003, and we did a stage reading of one of my plays. And then when the college closed, Naked Stage, which we had founded at Southampton College, moved to Guildhall. So I've been involved off and on with Naked Stage over the years. So, and as time has gone on, I've directed a number of things at Guildhall. So I've been involved, and I was there one night early on, which is probably the first time we met, when you read, or we read something of yours. And I don't know if your audience knows that you're a beautiful writer, and you should do more of it. And we should be putting on more of your writing.
Yes, I agree with you. So far I have 3 complete plays that are finished, and I have a couple of more in my head. And yes, so that's when we first met, when we were doing and you were in the audience, you were not reading.
Right. No, I'm not, I don't act. I was in a movie that you'll never see, that I made my acting debut. I think I had 7 or 8 words and a 13-second scene. And when one of my children saw the screening of the movie, they suggested I have my name taken off in the interest of helping the movie. You see. And I did, in one of the readings that Kate Muth, who does a lot of work at Guildhall, had, she coaxed me into reading one night, reading for Naked Stage.
Perseus.
And I managed to survive it without completely embarrassing myself. I like directing, and I've done now a lot of stuff at the John Drew Theater at Guildhall, but not acting.
Did you mention before that you had written a play also?
I've written a number of plays. 2 of them have had staged readings at Guildhall. 2003, and then somewhere around 2006, 2007, somewhere in there.
Then what was the name of it?
The first play is a play called Penang, and that play went into the Midtown International Theater Festival in 2007 in New York and won a bunch of prizes. We had 5 nominations, and we won some very nice prizes, including Best Drama. And then in 2008, that play was produced in a showcase run at the Workshop Main Stage Theater on 36th Street. And we had a very successful run and some nice reviews. And then in 2007, we did a stage reading of my play called 44 Sunset Park, which is a family drama set in the 1930s. Joan Copeland starred in that. Joan, who lives here, and wonderful actress who does a lot of stuff. And so I've been on that stage, or at least my work has been on that stage.
And how does it feel for you to watch your play being acted out?
It's complicated. It's complicated. The first time that my first play had a reading was in '97 or thereabouts at the Players in New York City. And a Hollywood friend of mine was there. And he said, before this is over, you are going to hate some of these people in a way you can't imagine. And he was absolutely right. There was a part of, it's a wartime play, and it's set in the service. And one of the characters is a old line naval character, salty, rednecky, but the kind of guys that keep the Navy running. And the director had an actor who had this wonderful Shakespearean voice, and he orated instead of speaking, and he overplayed, and he was frankly ridiculous in this reading. And we had an intermission, and the director tried to calm him down and said, you know, lighten it up. This isn't Henry III. It's, you know, it's an American. And he was an American, but he had one of those actory British accents.
He was probably used to playing Shakespeare.
Or just being, you know, just a terrible actor or something. But so I found out what my friend meant. I hated him because he was ruining the part and ruining the reading, and the other actors were angry about it because he was absurd. So when you say, how does it feel to see your stuff? It's complicated. If I've had far better experience than that. The production we had in the festival in 2007 that did very, very well, we had a cast in which everybody was spot on with what they had to do. They put their heart and soul into it, and they were good, and it worked. In 2008, the full production, which ran for 3 weeks, we had a good cast. We had one actor who was a little off for the part. So I think the first thing that happens when you see your work read or performed is obviously you're hearing it and seeing it through the actors. And you learn a lot about the writing, where to fix it, what's too long, what doesn't work, what works. So hearing it, as they say in the theater, on its feet is a whole different experience. And I remember with Penang, in that first reading, there was an element of the play, an element of the story, that was, in my mind, as the writer, transitional. That was just sort of aiding the plot development. When I heard the reading and saw the reaction to that portion, I realized it was a very dramatic element of the play. And in the audience, one could see that they reacted to it that way. So you learn a lot about what you think you put on the page and what happens when it's read out loud, or even better, when it's fully presented and performed. And I have found that with everything I've done, there are surprises and in some cases disappointments. You had something that you absolutely were certain worked beautifully, and you see it fall flat on its face, and you realize maybe you don't even need it, all that. So it's an interesting and a complicated process. But if you come up with a production that works, and ultimately I measure that by how an audience receives it. If an audience buys the story, believes the characters, and reacts emotionally, even if it's just comedy, you're looking for a laugh, whatever it is, you're appealing to people's emotions, that can be very satisfying.
Right. So I'm just curious, where are you from?
Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, what part?
Bay Ridge.
Bay Ridge.
Actually, technically, it's Dyker Heights, but most people don't know that name. Dyker Heights is just next over from the edge of Bay Ridge. It's where the Verrazano Bridge comes into Brooklyn.
It's a beautiful bridge.
A beautiful bridge. It wasn't there when I was a kid.
No. And you grew up there. I went to school.
I went to New York City public schools all the way through high school. And we always summered on Long Island, so I always think of myself as from Brooklyn and Long Island. We had little summer cottages here and there.
You had a summer cottage here in the Hamptons.
No, never here. We were in a town called Great River, which is over near Heckscher State Park on the South Shore, Islip, Bay Shore, over that way.
Suffolk.
And
yeah.
we had a little tiny, a real cottage, a little community by the bay. And we had that, actually when I was very, very young, my grandparents had a little house in Amityville, down by the water. So sort of the South Shore of Long Island's always been in my blood.
Yes, it must have been. So how did you come to the Hamptons?
Well,
It's
there's
not
a lot
too
of
far.
chapters in between. I went to Hofstra University, where I got
Oh,
my undergraduate
my son went
degree.
there.
Great college. I'm sure
Yeah.
he's brilliant if he went there, as I am.
Yeah.
And I went away to the Navy. And then I went to law school down in Washington, went to work on Capitol Hill. My early career was in government and politics. I served through the two administrations of Governor Carey, who just died last summer. I was in two different cabinet positions in the Carey administration. Then I served in the administration of Mario Cuomo. I served as Commissioner of Transportation. For Governor Carey, I was Commissioner of Energy. If you remember when gas was cheap and plentiful
Yes,
and there
I
were no
do.
problems, that's when I was Commissioner
You
of
should
Energy.
You should
And
go
then-
back there.
If you remember when I was at DOT, there was no traffic, gasoline was cheap. That was my time there.
See what happened when
See?
you left the place?
It's a shame. It's just both of them, both those public policy areas have gone to the dogs since I left. And I did between the two administrations for 10 or 12 years, and then I served on the New York Power Authority. I was chairman of the Long Island Power Authority. I was chairman of the Long Island Regional Planning Board. I was chairman of the Nature Conservancy. And these days I sit as one of the members of the New York State Public Service Commission. That's the body that regulates electric, gas, steam, water, cable, and television.
How do you like that? You are so talented.
Well, I can't seem to hold a job. I keep jumping from one thing to another. So most of my career has been in government and politics. I practiced law a little bit, but not very long. So I served for 7 or 8 years in Washington, which is where I was married and our first 2 children were born. Then we were in Albany for 8 years, and that's where our third born, he's our only New York-born child. And then what brought me here specifically, in the 90s, I ran, my only time I tried running for office, and I wasn't chosen, and I started teaching for Long Island University. And I was assigned here to Southampton College. And then either as a reward or a punishment, I don't know which, I became dean of the college. But it was at the time when the college was already in serious trouble. And I and some other people were there to try to save it.
Right.
And it was too late.
Too
And
late,
the
you
college
couldn't.
closed, as you know. It was then taken over by the state university, and it closed, at least the undergraduate portions of that closed. It still exists as part of SUNY in a very limited way with graduate programs, but a great disappointment. But anyway, that's what brought us to Sag Harbor, where we live full-time. And after the college closed, we were already settled here, and we decided to stay.
And you got stuck.
Well, we decided to stay. It was an affirmative choice. It was, it was a lot of, I spent a lot of time, I ran a business group on Long Island for a long time. A lot of time thinking about where people settle and why. And particularly on this East End, we have a wonderful population of people who go back generations, who built this place and created a quality of life that is unsurpassed, in my view, anywhere in the country. And it also has a secondary population, which is people who have come here by choice. And communities that have a lot of people who come as a matter of choice
Right.
are enriched in another way. And so you have these two populations, two histories that come together here. And the people who come by choice, in turn, have children here, and they become native, if you will, or local, which is not a term I like. So I think part of what makes the East End so special is, first of all, geographically, the physical environment is beyond measure. And you have population or populations here who are keenly committed to trying to keep it, to preserve what's good here. There's obviously the constant battle of development. When I was chairman of the Nature Conservancy, we were very much involved in trying to keep property out of the development cycle, which is a very important thing to do. So I'm an East Ender now by choice. Been here since 2000, I think.
Yeah, me too.
And it's one of the great places in the world.
Well, this topic that you just brought up, it would make for a very good book. Did you ever think about writing a book?
I think about writing books all the time. That's not a book I'm likely to write.
About people who live here, if they live here by choice or they live here because of their ancestors. That's a very interesting topic.
Well, there's a real problem, though. I mean, in the real world now, one of the downsides of having the place in so much demand is that the economy gets beyond the reach of a lot of ordinary people. And generations who grew up here before have a great deal of difficulty finding a place in this economy for their children. And that's a great tragedy. It's a tragedy when it happens anywhere. People in Manhattan may have their children grow up there and can't afford to make their lives there.
Where
so
are
it's a
your
complicated
children?
problem. My children my daughter is in New York. She's a writer. Our oldest boy is in Washington. He is a lawyer in the Department of Justice. And our third born, our baby, if you will, is in California in the movie business. So we've got three scattered around. There was a time when they were all in New York. That was great, but this day and age,
So you get to travel a lot.
we keep moving, yeah.
Right.
Keep moving around.
Yes.
We were in Washington very recently to see that son and his wife.
And where did you inherit this talent, what you have from your mother, father, grandmother?
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to accept the premise that I have any talent. You asked me if I was an actor. I told
think
you I
you
was a
are
faker. So where did I live?
Well, even that is excellent.
I had
in my eyes, you are.
terrific parents, and
What?
my parents were terrific, but they weren't in government. They weren't in politics.
And
They
were
weren't in
not
the arts. They weren't writers, but they were great family people.
So you don't want to say what they did.
My father was a plumber. My mother
Oh.
was what we call a stay-at-home mother.
Yeah,
and,
well, that's great. I wish I knew anything about plumbing. I could.
it's like the old joke, the plumber presents the bill to the doctor, and the doctor says, I'm a doctor and I don't charge that much. The plumber
Yeah.
says, well, either did I when I was a doctor.
Yeah.
So that was my father.
And I'm always curious, how did you happen to write those plays? What made you think about those things? What made you decide to write a play like that about the war?
Well, I had always dabbled in writing, but not very seriously. And when I was in the service, I tried to keep a diary, and I wasn't very good at it. And I would write things down, and I would read them, and then I would tear them up. And I think what was happening to me then is the writing I was doing wasn't honest. I was putting down what I thought I should be putting down
Nothing
or
wrong with
expressing.
that.
But it wasn't, I didn't feel that it was honest.
You didn't feel
And when
right.
I would read it back to myself, not always right away, but at some point, it always seemed false and sometimes absurd to me. So I came out of that war experience and everything else with nothing on paper, even though I thought I might. And then, I don't know, maybe 25 years ago or so, I just started writing. And I started writing in the play format. And I can't really explain why. It's not an easy format, but Then again, what is, if you're trying to be serious about it. But somehow I've always loved theater. I felt comfortable with theater. And I like the play form. I like live drama, live theater more than, and I like movies and I like a lot of other stuff. But anyway, so I started when I decided I would try to be more serious and more honest about what I wanted to write. I just started writing plays.
So you got the material partially from your experience in the service.
Well, in that particular play, yeah. But the Sunset Park play, which we also did here, is really drawn from my mother's life in the 1930s. It's a family drama that is meant to be a faithful telling, or at least the departure point for the play is a faithful telling of what I understood about my mother's life and the struggles of Irish Catholic family in Brooklyn, where they grew up in the 1930s, and the Depression and the onset of the war. And that. So, as you do, and as I recall your writing, you draw from what you know.
Yes.
And I think that's where you can, if you're going to find something that works, and as far as I'm concerned, works means that upon hearing or seeing, people react with genuine emotion to what you've done or belief, then it's probably easier to do that if you're drawing from what you know. Now, there are obviously a lot of writers who can draw from anything and write from anything. I've never gotten that far.
It's a funny thing, when I watched my play read, I laughed so much because it wasn't what I intended, but the way it came out to me, it was just so funny.
Isn't it funny how that happens? You intended one thing and something else was happening, but it was okay. Yeah.
The audience didn't know. I mean, they went along with it, but I was just laughing so much. It was just, it's interesting how other people could interpret what you write. It's many different ways, and it's also director has a say-so in it.
Well, a lot of writers will tell you that they learn things about their own writing every time they hear somebody else read it.
You're right.
And I would not have thought that would be the case. I know what I wrote. The first time it happened to me, I said, "Of course, I get it." So that's part of what's so exciting about trying to be a writer and churning this stuff out, talking somebody into trying to read it or do it.
Are you working on something now?
I'm always working on something. Nothing ready to talk about. But I mean, it's interesting. I'm one of those people who almost will never show anybody what I've written on paper. I'll do a reading, even a cold reading I've been part of a playwrights group in New York for years, and we do cold readings of new stuff.
Oh,
and
really?
I can bring my stuff there and hear it and all of that. But I don't like people to see it on the page. I would rather them see it in the format of a live read. That's just me. I mean, other people do it the other way. So part of that, I guess, is I don't talk about what I'm working on.
That's okay. Well, I'm working on, somebody had written a book of short stories, and I liked, she was my guest, Barbara Goldowski. I don't know if you know her. And I took 2 of her short stories and I made it into a 1-act play.
Nice.
And she liked it. So it was fun to do.
I don't know if you were there last year, but I did that with a friend's play. She had written a book, a diary, a memoir, and it had sort of evolved into a radio play that Sigourney Weaver had done, but just as a one-woman play. And it was about a relationship between her and a young patient of hers. And so and she'd wanted to evolve it a little bit. So I reconfigured it, added the part of the boy, and we read it at Guildhall. It was quite nice. But it's fun. But it was started with somebody else's work.
Yes.
And it's her work. I just took what was there and rearranged it and made it into a 1-act. It ran, I don't know, 28 or 30 minutes. And so that's fun when you're, particularly if that writer is a friend or somebody you know and respect.
Yes. So I always said that writing came easy to me. And whether it's a book or
Good,
a
I'm jealous.
story or a play, it just once I sit down, it just, and when it's done, I'm looking, I said, did I really do that?
You are a lucky girl, let me tell you. If
Really?
it comes easy, boy,
Yeah.
I wish I could say that.
Yes, it
I
does.
struggle,
Really. That's why sometimes I get mad at myself when I'm not doing anything. I should be. I could
I
have.
think if everybody does things their own way, but I like to always be at it on some level. And right now, this thing I've been working on hasn't quite clicked in
Yeah,
terms of what
well,
I'm doing
it has
with it.
to click
But
in
you got,
before you write it.
but you have to keep at it. At least I do. It's the only way it ever comes. If it ever comes,
If
or
it-
at least in my opinion, if it ever comes, it's because you just keep plugging away. Maybe something.
Well, I have, as I say, I've known you for many years, but now I really got a lot of insight of you. You told me and the whole world all about you and what you do.
You've exposed all my secrets here.
Yes, and don't don't be surprised if you'll get a lot of phone calls and people will ask for your autograph.
Oh, stop it.
So
The only one asking for my autograph is a bill collector. I want you to-
yeah. And make sure you write practice your signature.
Right.
I used to do that almost every play I went to out here. When I got to the end of the show, I took the program and I went up to the actors. May I have your autograph? And I just went to a play last weekend. I didn't do that, and I said, "Gee, I'm just not. I don't feel that way anymore."
It's funny how these things happen. I was once mistaken for the Attorney General of New York, Bob Abrams, who's about 6 inches shorter than me and bald as a cue.
Oh.
So who knows how these things work.
Thank you so much for coming. I had a lot of fun with you.
It's nice to be here. And there's that music again. I hear.
Yes. Yeah.
And you keep writing too.
Yes. So another half hour went by, and it was very nice and peaceful and pleasant.
And maybe we'll do it again someday.
Oh,
I can
yes.
interview you the next time. How's that?
Yes, you could
That would
do
be
that.
fun. That would be fun.
I made a mistake before. You said you went to Hofstra. I said my son actually went to Delphi.
Ah, arch rival.
Oh, yeah. So when he's going to look at this, he'll say, Mom, I didn't go to Hofstra. I go